welcome. This, of course, is Headlocks and Headphones. My name is Martin Anderson with you for the next, well, do you know what? It's going to be a shorter episode today. And I'm going to tackle the elephant in the room. No, not my mother-in-law. I'm going to tackle the elephant in the room, and that is this. No, I do not have a massive cold sore on my lip. I'm just an idiot that forgot how to shave. And when I was trying to shave this bit to make myself look that a little bit more Amish, I've ended up nearly cutting my whole lip off. But at least I'm not bleeding anymore. It's just really sore when I speak, and every time it stretches. How do wrestlers cut their head open if this is how this stuff feels? This is horrible. I'm telling you. I do not like bleeding, but I'm going to get through this show without actually moaning any more about it. But this is not a cold sore. Since I've had 3 or 4 people in work ask, is that a cold sore? No, I cut myself with a razor. Oh, is it because you're a wrestling fan? No, it's not because I'm a wrestling fan. I'm an idiot that made a mistake. And I won't get down that route. Anyway, so welcome to Headlocks and Headphones. My name, of course, you've already heard it, is Martin Anderson. Now, for the past couple of days, we have been sitting on the announcement of participant 3 for the CWF Fresh Start show in June. Subject to change, obviously, with COVID, but they are very hopeful that they're going to get to run on June the 19th in Glasgow, and everything's going to go well. That's at least the ideal scenario. Now, we're going to talk about that very, very soon. We're going to have the reveal of participant number 3. We also have a little surprise in there as well, one which apparently none of the 3 people in that conversation expected to be happening, but it did. For more on that, stay tuned. It will be coming up very soon. Before then, I'm going to talk about wrestling news. This is actually kind of becoming more about the opinion corner, where I kind of have opinions on, well, stupid people normally. But that's kind of what this week is going to be. It's another wrestling news / opinion corner special. But we have to talk about TakeOver. We have to talk about TakeOver Vengeance Day, which is their alternative version of Valentine's Day. We have to talk about it. It's a hell of a show. There's not much to complain about in that show, which I know if anybody's listened to the show before, watched the show before, I'm sorry if you have to look at my face every now and again, but this is one hell of a show. Very few things to complain about. Obviously, the usual things that we complain about with NXT shows in terms of things lasting a bit too long and too many false finishes and all that kind of stuff, but I've decided I'm going to try and focus more on the positives, and we'll talk about some of the reactions to the matches as well. But that's coming later, and will come after our CWF announcement, which will fit somewhere in this section of the show, if you know what that means. So, like, this is the section we're in now. This is the section where CWF will be, and then we'll talk about NXT Takeover. So, less of me introducing stuff, and more of us getting on with the wrestling news. So one thing in recent months even, that I've been kind of having a go at people for is this lack of following rules over COVID, telling people to wear their masks. It shouldn't be that big a deal. I work in retail where we're told we can't tell people they have to wear their masks. But we have seen NXT superstar Kacy Catanzaro has actually deleted her Twitter, or at least deactivated it. Before the Super Bowl, she posted a video inside a restaurant with some friends, none of whom were wearing masks. And obviously, the typical keyboard warriors on Twitter jumped on to say, oh, she's not wearing a mask. She should know better. She should stay at home and blah, blah, blah. Well, in Scotland, which is where I am, we were allowed to, in restaurants, take off masks to eat food. It's a little bit hard to eat food like this. So clearly, if restaurants are open, you have to take your mask off. If you're the idiot that was sending abuse to somebody who was following the rules in their state, then shame on you. This is the culture that is constantly pissing me off about Twitter. If you are jumping on Twitter simply to bully people and tell them, oh, well, you shouldn't have went to the restaurant, you shouldn't have taken your mask off, they're allowed to. Just like we were allowed to in Scotland. I took my 3-year-old to a pub the first day the pub was reopened after lockdown, and I'm not going to share the picture, but the look of joy on his face when we stepped foot in the pub, he was like, oh, we get to have pub food. This is awesome. You could tell he was excited. And we followed every damn rule there was, just like Kacy Catanzaro did. She also recorded a video letting people know that she followed the rules, and she made it clear to everybody that she has taken out all the precautions that they're asked to take. She did say, "I'm sorry for anybody that's upset. I understand your concern, and I want you to know that I do care about the safety of others around me and myself, and I follow all of the protocols. Luckily for me with work, we get tested at least once a week, if not twice sometimes, and I carry my hand sanitizer and, well, we're not entirely sure what she says there. It kind of goes out a little bit, with me everywhere. Everywhere that we have to wear, I wear a mask. I'm sorry that this moment made people think otherwise. I just want you all to know that I hear you. I appreciate the concern. I'm looking out for the safety of others around me, as well as trying to take care of myself the best I can. And I wish the best for everybody else." And she still got abuse. In fact, at Charlotte Empire was the one that posted, "If you don't stay your ass at home," about her. Now, to be honest, if you have the ability to go out and you're being tested regularly in your work and you're following the protocols, going to a bar for some food is relatively safe. The bar trade in Scotland, I have several friends who work in the bar trade. They're happy to tell me the statistics of how safe it is. The level of infections in bars, based on the precautions that are being taken, are very low, unless you're one particular bar here in Aberdeen, in which case, who cares about rules? You're on the licensing committee, so do whatever the hell you want. But we won't go into that because they're soulless. But if you are out there and you are doing stuff like this, the entire bar is full of people without masks, but they had to attack the wrestler because obviously nobody else in that bar has any social media following that would warrant them getting attention. If you're that person, screw you. And if you feel that you can bully other people simply to get attention, then you should be taken off Twitter. Not Casey Catanzaro. I hope she comes back and I hope she burns every single one of you. If you're a Facebook or Twitter bully, then screw you. Now, let's move on to something a little bit more cheery. Tommy Dreamer turned 50. And you know what? I'm shocked he turned 50. I thought he was already well into his 50s. But it just shows how young he was when he was involved in ECW. Now, Rich Swann granted an Impact World Championship match to Tommy Dreamer, and after defeating him in a big match, both he and Dreamer were the victim of a vicious assault at the hands of Moose. There's also several other things happening as well on the Impact show in the past couple of weeks. We will talk about something involving Impact very, very soon. Tommy Dreamer at 50, I am truly, truly shocked. Now, what this actually brings up is another story about Tommy Dreamer that I do want to talk about. And it's this idea that everybody thinks that WWE didn't give a two craps about Tommy Dreamer, and we're never going to do anything about pushing him. What's quite interesting is at the point where we got Shawn Michaels in the brown tights at Elimination Chamber, allegedly, that was intended to be Tommy Dreamer's spot. Now, D'Lo recalled being in the story, and both were asked if there were any more stories in their respective careers that were axed for one reason or another. Now, Dreamer focused heavily on the two that stood out in his career, the first of which would have been Triple H and WWE. Behind-the-scenes politics got in the way of his feud, and this is what Dreamer had to say. "For me, there were two that would have been great. I was supposed to have a 2 to 3 program with Triple H and main event with him for the title. Never happened. Behind-the-scenes BS that would have been great for my career. Plus, to be honest, Triple H is one of my last ever dream matches because I still do think he's one of the best heels of all time. I was a pretty good babyface, but I was always thought of like babyface Tommy Dreamer from ECW versus heel Triple H, or then when I was there and we were doing the ECW stuff, or even when I had my own company, House of Hardcore, and he had NXT, and he kept on signing talents that I was using." Dreamer explained, "I always thought there was something to that. So for me, plus the financial side of those matches, it would have been phenomenal, but it didn't happen, and they brought Shawn Michaels back with that horrible haircut and those horrible brown tights to replace me." So that's really interesting to hear, that we would have had Tommy Dreamer versus Triple H if it wasn't for the return of Shawn Michaels. Now, obviously, in hindsight, Shawn Michaels' return was bigger for the business. However, I certainly think, based on the year that happened, 2002, 18 years ago, that makes Tommy Dreamer 32 years of age. For me, at that point, if he'd had that chance and he'd been in against Hunter and that had went well, even if he wasn't a main event guy, that would have turned him from a joke comedy wrestler into somebody that could be taken seriously. Now, he was never the most proficient of wrestlers, but he was capable. And I think it would be exciting to see what would have happened if Tommy Dreamer, the face of ECW for many people, was to have faced off against Triple H, and it was not to be basically a squash to make WWF look good. I think that would have been a very, very cool chance for Tommy Dreamer, and would have been something that would have not only helped WWE at a time where they were really lacking in talents, but would have really helped if they'd still opted to go down the route of bringing back ECW. They wouldn't have just had RVD as the big star in ECW. They would have also had Tommy Dreamer, which could have inevitably led to other characters like Sabu actually being over at some point. Now, when we look at WWE and the amount of mistakes that they've made, one mistake that I've had conversations with people about that they made was letting D.H. Smith, Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith Jr. go. I personally don't think it was a mistake to let Harry Smith Jr. go. Davey Boy Smith Jr., Harry Smith, D.H. Smith, whatever name he's going at this week. He left Major League Wrestling last year, and I did say that I would love to see him end up in WWE, particularly with his dad going into the Hall of Fame. I think it's very fitting. He's also a much better performer than he was when he left. I think going out into the world on his own has made him a better performer, much like what happened with Drew. And I think that his presence in WWE would be very, very, it would certainly lead to a shakeup of the roster. And even if he was to be called up to work for NXT and NXT UK, I think he would be a huge addition to NXT UK, and his presence in NXT would still be very, very huge. His family name alone would give him the opportunity to get his foot in the door for many casual fans. But at the same time, when you see him work, he can work, and he's a big guy. He did say in an interview with the Metro, he's seen a lot of interest in where he'll sign next, including from WWE. And he said there's been quite a bit of interest and a little bit of back and forth talk with myself and the company. I think that the plan, or what they were hoping, was for me to come to NXT UK. But right now, because of COVID, those doors are kind of locked. But we'll see. Now, he does live in Tampa, Florida. And it would be very, very easy for him to show up at NXT and to work those tapings. And then as the pandemic eases off, make appearances for NXT UK. I would put my money on he's not a good fit for AEW. He's not a good fit for Impact Wrestling. He would do well in both those companies. I think his spiritual home is WWE. It certainly is the place where he still has unfinished business there. His last run didn't go well. I think coming back to WWE and having the chance to demonstrate who he is, particularly if WWE are going to be changing up their roster and they're losing certain talents from NXT, having talent like that stepping in with a name value is going to be huge for WWE. Now, I know that usually the Royal Rumble is a way to introduce new characters, a way to bring back old veterans. MVP last year. You also have Carlito this year, who looks like he may be getting a producer's job, which great for him. But I think he can still go. And I think Harry Smith is very much of an age where he can still go, even if he was to sign for just a few years. So it'd be very cool to see what happens. My fingers are crossed, and hopefully we get Davey Boy Smith Jr. back. And I'd love to see him go with the Davey Boy Smith Jr. name. Now, a return that happened at NXT TakeOver, which happened on the pre-show, so we can talk about it in the wrestling news, not when we talk about the show, is the return of Eli Drake. Now, a lot of people don't realize Eli Drake was previously signed to NXT. He was also part of one of the Rock's TV shows where it was like... not vigilantes, that's not the name, but like heroes, people who stand up and do things. I think that was the show he was on, wasn't it? He was part of a show with The Rock, and he was there because of his ability to talk. He was suggested by WWE as far as I know. So he's somebody who, his promo work is great. His in-ring work is better now than it's ever been. I think... if anything, the fact that he was able to work with Grado and make that work, and this is not to insult Grado, I love Grado, but the fact that he was able to work such a different style and have entertaining matches and promos with somebody that he couldn't understand what Grado was saying, he just had to kind of infer from context. So the fact that he was able to do that means that if he was able to work with some of the roster that's there on NXT, I think he's going to do very, very well. I certainly think with NXT losing, Keith Lee, Damian Priest and several others. They needed to inject some fresh blood in there. I know that people would say, yeah, well, why don't they just push the people that are already there? And that's fine. But when you look at the addition of Samoa Joe, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Roode, these were people put in there and they actually helped to elevate the other guys. I certainly think there's a lot of good talent in NXT, but having those guys coming up just creates fresh matches. And I think Kyle O'Reilly especially has been a standout during the pandemic. He's done very well. I think he's shown more of his personality than ever before. To know that Kyle O'Reilly is a babyface, to know that there is several people on that roster that Eli Drake could have good promos with. And I know if you haven't seen NXT TakeOver, I'm going to be spoiling it for you very soon. So let's tell you something that happened. There may be some issues in the Undisputed Era. That's why I'm not talking about the Undisputed Era. We'll talk more about exactly what happened when we talk about the show. But that's kind of the position that we're in. We see Kyle O'Reilly as a standout performer. I certainly think that Roderick Strong's a great performer, a strong performer in ring. Where he lacks is promo. And that could be the fact that WWE haven't given him a chance. Where Eli Drake comes in is instantly show one, he shows up and he cuts a promo where he basically thanks Wade Barrett for being very supportive of him as he comes in, but then criticizes him and then criticizes everybody else there. It shows the personality, the narcissist that he really is. Eli Drake can justify being a narcissist. He is that good at promos. In ring, I think he's probably a B+ player as far as some people would be concerned. But the B+ player in ring in WWE works very well if you have the character, and Eli Drake certainly, the LA Knight certainly has the ability to get a lot of success in WWE, particularly in NXT, where he's going to get a chance to shine and hopefully have some longer matches than he would get on Raw or SmackDown, and the chance to cut promos and show his personality. Now, Braun Strowman, talking about his personality, he doesn't come across, for me, very personable on TV. Having met him, he comes across very well, and he spoke with me and my wife when we met him here in Aberdeen, and he was very nice and spoke with his real voice, which is very much more of an accent. He softens it a lot for TV. But he said this week he's got really sick over the week, got an infection that got into my blood system. I had to get put on antibiotics for that. It was awful. I've dropped 15 pounds in 5 days. Couldn't eat and stuff like that. But it looks like I've got 50 pounds of water weight. All my joints and everything are all swollen and inflamed. The antibiotics are working. I'm feeling better. We're going to nip this thing in the bud, get back to training, put that mask back on, and I'll be back to seeing you guys very soon. It seems like the past 6 to 8 months, he's been kind of battling one thing after another. He had a long-term injury. He got suspended, storyline reasons, and now he's battling bloodstream issues. Every wrestler at some point has that little run where nothing's going right for you. I think he's had a torrid time since the end of his Bray Wyatt feud, but it'd be good to see him come back and kind of get some momentum going on, which is a great thing. Now, talking of comebacks, we did mention Carlito, and he had to say this week that the WWE culture is healthier and people are genuinely happy. It's safe to say WWE changed a lot since he left the company in 2010. Now, he was on After the Bell with Corey Graves. He described the biggest differences he's noticed, and he highlighted the culture and the morale backstage as the two made changes. Now, he said, the biggest thing is just the culture in the back. It's a lot tamer. I think a lot healthier. And it seems like the guys are genuinely happy in the back. So that was a good thing to see. The morale seems to be up. Carlito also highlighted the company's wellness policy, another major change that has helped WWE. I feel like the guys are smarter now. It seems like they're being taken care of. Like the wellness policy is another good idea just because we were crazier back in those days. I think it's a good thing to have under control. You know what I mean? Make sure everybody's on the up and up and everybody's taking care of themselves. Now, since he'd returned at the Rumble, a lot of people wondered what the future holds for him. He admitted that he hasn't signed anything yet. He hasn't agreed to any deals. He does say that he'll see what the future holds. Bear in mind, MVP returned at the Rumble. He made some appearances on Raw, got hired as a producer, and they got put on TV. Certainly, when you look at Carlito and how he looks now, there's absolutely no reason that he shouldn't be on TV. He's very capable. Is he going to be main eventing? No. But certainly, he's a very able-bodied person to have on that roster who could be having good matches week in, week out. And if you've got a 3-hour Raw, good matches are something that you want to have. I certainly would be interested to see Carlito against the likes of The Miz, John Morrison, and then you obviously have the Hurt Business, and several others that he could go against if he was a babyface. And then if he's a heel, he's got, I'd love to see him against Ricochet. I think that would be very interesting. And there's several others that I think on Raw would benefit from having a series of good matches. Now, Sarah Logan, who was my favorite member of the Riot Squad, has given birth. Eric of the Viking Raiders and Sarah Logan have expanded their family, and they've named their new baby boy Raymond Cash Rowe. Logan is a former WWE superstar, a former member of the Riot Squad, and alongside Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott. I think the Riot Squad were very cool. I think there was a lot there. There was 2 different teams debuted at the same time, one on Raw, one on SmackDown. There was just a sudden influx of lots of female talent, and it was very good. I really liked Sarah Logan, and having seen some of her indie stuff, I thought she was going to do really well. I just think she'd been booked horribly when she became a single star. But with Ivar on the shelf, Eric gets a chance to sit at home and spend time with his family. 8 pound, 11 ounces, 44 hours of labor, which just sounds horrendous. My wife did, well, she did from Friday morning at 7 a.m. until Sunday at 9 a.m. roughly. So yeah, it can be quite long for some people, but everybody appears to be fine, and that's the most important thing. Congratulations to Sarah Logan and her partner. Now, there was some reports this week that Sammy Guevara had heat with AEW. Tony Khan was pissed, and I did add to the wrestling group chat that I'm in, because I thought, this is exactly what I thought would happen with things like companies working together. Wrestlers aren't happy with creative, and they no-show. There's a lack of respect if you no-show something. But to be honest, he basically cancelled his appearance the night before. And AEW are saying there's no heat on their side. But of course they would say that, because they weren't the ones that got screwed over by Sammy Guevara, their talent. Impact Wrestling formatted their show. Impact Wrestling has Sammy Guevara they planned in their show. And creative was run by everybody, and all of a sudden Sammy Guevara is not happy. For me, this sounds like it could be a work, it could be storyline, but if it's not, it's exactly why any relationship between different companies doesn't work. The simple fact is, AEW, if he really did walk out on their partner Impact Wrestling and refused to do the angle as had been agreed, then either their communication is poor, which is a possibility, or Sammy Guevara just decided he didn't want to do what Impact had planned. But if that's the plan that they have going forward, then why would Impact invest any time in their talent? Why would New Japan Pro Wrestling, when they know that people might just decide at the last minute they don't want to show up, why would they invest time in AEW talent? Because AEW might not punish them, but they're certainly going to suffer from it. This is why everybody on the internet is saying, oh, why doesn't Vince just sign relationships with all these companies and have working agreements and they can have dream matches? Well, the reason being, dumbasses, is because although that's really, really nice, as a practical enterprise for any business, it throws up so many hurdles. When you have sponsors who are paying for your company and your talent to be on the show that they're sponsoring, they don't want you to flood that show with lots of other people. They don't want you to promote the talent that appears for AEW who are advertising with your rival. Now, I can't definitely say that that's a big reason why WWE aren't doing it. WWE spend lots of money on production, lots of money on advertising, brand awareness. Why would they go and give another company that isn't spending that money brand awareness? I know people would say, yeah, but it would give people good matches. Why? You've just seen what happens with Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara decides at the last minute creative isn't good. So there's a relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling and WWE. WWE want their wrestler to go over. It's Ricochet versus Tama Tonga. And they want Ricochet to go over. And Tama decides the night before, absolutely not happening, and just doesn't show up. But WWE have just spent 3 weeks advertising that match. They've spent all that money flying him in, or at least paying for everything to fly him in, and he decides he doesn't want to lose. This is why arrangements between companies often fall apart. Just look at the shows that they did in the 80s where you had AWA NWA companies and various other organizations trying to work together, and somebody kept the money, somebody else was trying to sign other people's talents away. It just doesn't work. And when it does, it can be entertaining. And it'll work for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, you get people no-showing. You get people deciding they don't like creative. And you get people deciding that the payoff wasn't big enough, or they were lied to by this person. Guess what? Promoters lie. They have to. They have to tell you that you're the best thing since sliced bread, because they need you to be motivated and go out there. That's not even necessarily a lie. It's a motivation technique. They tell you you're the best thing since sliced bread. Your performance raises a little. You go out there and you have a great match. Now you actually feel that way. And Sammy Guevara, and let's be honest, creative at times for him has been very, very stupid, particularly when, if you think about it, some people have been cancelled for comments that they've said. And it seems almost like Sammy Guevara's comments about Sasha Banks were just put down to him being a child, which, you know, in some ways I agree, but obviously in other ways I don't. He said the things he said. He had discussions with Sasha Banks. Sasha's admitted it herself. And they've kind of smoothed things over. And I'm sure there's no guy anywhere over the age of 20 that can honestly say at no point ever have they said something inappropriate about somebody they would like to sleep with. It's just something that's happened. I know a lot of girls that have said, I've been around it. This is not a gendered thing. There's a lot of people who say things about people they want to sleep with, and they don't mean anything by it. It's just one of those things. And we have to look at Sammy and realize that the chances are that was probably a massive wake-up call for him, and realizing how important the things that you say actually are when you make it in a media business. The thing that's quite interesting for me, creative, which is the issue why he didn't want to show up to Impact, yet has no issue showing up for the shitty creative that he's had at AEW, where one more thing with MJF and he's going to leave the inner circle, and then all of a sudden later on he's showing up in a room and getting everybody to leave so that him and MJF can talk. I mean, who does that? Especially when Simon Guevara then turns to the camera and says, no, the camera can stay. Oh, right, because this private conversation that can't have your friends there can have the camera there, which then means that they all know what's being said anyway. Kind of stupid. It's the same stupid stuff they criticize WWE for. Well, why are they having this private conversation plan and everything when they know the camera's there? Well, exactly. Some people who write TV shows try to get around that by having almost like a secret camera, or almost making it look like somebody was looking around the corner, which I actually really liked. But this is going down a rabbit hole. Any wrestler that no-shows for a promotion, for me, if they've already agreed to do it, it's a piece of shit. Not only when there's fans there, if you've been advertised, you're letting the fans down. So you could argue, okay, there's no fans there, so you're not letting them down. And it hadn't been advertised as much, so it's probably not as big a deal. But the entire premise of him saying that he needed a break from AEW was that he would show up on Impact. It's part of the crossover, and now he doesn't like creative. You know, I just have an issue when wrestlers turn around and say they have an issue with creative that's been agreed. Now, if talent wants to say, I know for a fact that there's been conversations with CWF, Stuart Murphy has told me there's been conversations where the talent that he's approaching, he's telling them the ideas that he has for the future. And every now and again, a talent will say, I kind of don't agree with that. Could we do something else? And they pivot and change. But that is fine. You're working with your talent. The creative is something that should be almost a collaborative effort. And the person in charge paints the overall strategy, and then the performers, the artists that you're paying to fill in the blanks of what you've come up with, they have the chance to be creative. But when somebody agrees to it and walks away, that pisses me off. And I'm sorry, if you're a fan of Sammy Guevara and you're pissed off by what I'm saying, then you piss me off, because to me, that's a problem. If you're a wrestler and you decide to no-show because you're unhappy with creative, and you decide the night before to no-show when you know that company's probably going to have to sit and rewrite the whole thing, that's a pain in the ass. It's an absolute pain in the ass. I've been involved in running events in the past that weren't wrestling related, and I can tell you now, if something that I had booked decided at the last minute they weren't going to show up, that could mess up the whole show that you had planned. So yeah, Sammy Guevara pisses me off. in more ways than one. Anyway, let's move on. So one of the things I've really enjoyed about the WWE Network is the old Superstars episodes. Now, I remember getting VHS and recording long play and getting 8 hours. So actually having 10 episodes of Superstars, because I would cut the adverts out because I would sit and pause and then hit record and stuff. And those episodes that I have on VHS somewhere are now cropping up on the network. Now, they've just added quite a few new episodes, starting with the 16th of October 1993, and then flying through several weeks. We have the Rock and Roll Express making their Superstars debut. We have Doink versus Barry Horowitz. We have Razor Ramon, Diesel, Bastion Booger in action in the first week. You then move on. You have the Hart Family feud, which is stemming from Survivor Series. The All-Americans about to take on the Foreign Fanatics. Razor Ramon puts the IC belt against Rick Martel. Jerry the King Lawler and Bret Hart have a confrontation. There's some really cool stuff. So if you are looking to catch up with some old wrestling, go out of your way. It looks like it's going to be a hell of a long couple of nights for me as I try and catch up with the stuff that they're uploading. Now, talking about catching up with old wrestlers, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but if we're going to look at old wrestlers, Keiji Muto has decided that he will retire at 60. He's sticking with Pro Wrestling Noah for 2 more years, and DDT Pro has also locked down another Japanese wrestling. Now, Keiji Muto has signed a new 2-year contract with Pro Wrestling Noah. What's really interesting is there's a new contract with Cyber Agent, the parent owner of both Noah and DDT Pro, which signifies that Muto will continue as an active wrestler. He will defend the GHC Championship against Kaito Kayomaya on March 14th, which happens to be my birthday. If anybody wants to send me a card, it wouldn't go amiss. He is somebody. The Great Muta is one of those really, really cool gimmicks that I think anybody that says that it hasn't inspired a generation of wrestlers is missing the point. I think one of the things that's quite interesting is we wouldn't have Tajiri without him. Certainly, I think his influence over people like Sting in recent years has been huge. And I also think that with the news coming out that he is a heavyweight champion, I say coming out, he captured the GHN heavyweight title. He looked really good for a 58-year-old, and people who criticize WWE are saying that it's very cool he won the belt. And you know what? I never criticize when old guys win the belts, because sometimes you need that for whatever the journey is you're getting to. To see him winning it is very cool. Now, for anybody who isn't aware, Vince McMahon and Goldberg were 54 and 53 when they won their titles. Terry Funk was 53 when he won the ECW World title. Tenryu was 52 when he won the Triple Crown in All Japan. Sting was 52 when he won the TNA World Championship. And Ric Flair was 51 when he won his last WCW World Championship. So age is but a number if you're physically able to go. And I think he's definitely changed his style. He's slowed down a lot. But I've seen some negativity to an old guy winning the belt. I think in Japan, he's revered as a legend, much in the same way that we look at people like Hulk Hogan, minus the racism thing. But the way we look at him is pretty much the way the Japanese look at Muto. He is somebody who has remained pretty active in recent years. But congratulations to him for being a world champion at 58 as well. And he looks really good. I mean, I've got a picture of him in front of me. He looks really good. And I have to say, I really like his haircut. Now, WWE have went on a signing spree. For anybody who isn't aware, if you've missed the start of the show, Eli Drake has returned to WWE. Yes, I said returned. It's another nail in the coffin of the NWA, I think, especially with Thunder Rosa and AEW and several other talents leaving. Wade Barrett is now the commentator in NXT. NWA have lost quite a lot, but we have seen Blake Christian Casanova, Harlem Bravado from Evolve have just been added to that list, and Taya Valkyrie, who is John Morrison's wife. I don't mean to say that to say she is John Morrison's wife, but just for context, that's who she is. She's a former Impact Wrestling Women's Champion, possibly their best female wrestler they've had there in 10 years. They had Mickie James during that period, but she was certainly at the end of her run rather than at the start. Now, that has been the wrestling news. Coming up after a short little break, we're going to be heading to our interview with participant number 3 and our surprises. Immediately following that, we're going to go straight into talking about NXT TakeOver. So, hello and welcome to the show, Murphy. It's been quite an interesting couple of weeks. You were meant to be on the show last week, but obviously a little bit of a medical emergency has kind of distracted you a little bit. We still managed to announce participant 2 for the tournament, Dalen Hendry. How do you feel that went? Do you feel that he's ready? Because he seems to be your guy.
Yeah, I feel he's ready. 100% ready. He's focused and he's committed and he wants to be the best. And that's exactly what you need in the CWF.
One of the things I've seen is certainly some of the clips I've seen of him from earlier in his career compared to now, he seems to be, he's latching on to anything he can to try and take advantage of situations. So he's getting good luck charms and he's trying everything he can to make everything in his favor. And that's kind of all you need in today's wrestling business. If you've got something going for you, take advantage of it. Now, next week, we are going to have a proper sit-down interview with you, or it should be next week. We're going to have a proper sit-down interview with you where we're going to speak about exactly what it is that your medical issue is. But this week, we have the joy of announcing participant number 3, somebody who is so new to me that when I went to do research on this, there's nothing available on him. I mean, I know his name, I know his height, but he hasn't had a lot of matches. He doesn't have a lot of footage out there. So I want to hand over to you so you can introduce participant 3 in the CWF tournament.
Thank you very much. So a brief quickly about this man. He is a very, very tall individual and he's fresh, he's raw, he's exactly what we need for the fresh start of wrestling at CWF. And that man is Colton Davis.
Now, for those who don't know him, we're going to add him into the chat and we are going to be able to speak to, and this is hopefully going to be a regular thing. We're going to bring people who are part of the CWF tournament into things. Now, a very young looking man here. Hello, Colton. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'll be much happier once I get my university out of the way, but wrestling is a fun thing to look forward to. Now, you've just been announced for the 19th of June for the CWF tournament. It was announced just the other week that the CWF tournament is no longer for an opportunity to face an international star to crown the first ever champion. This is for, to use a Gorilla Monsoon term, this is for all the marbles. This is for the CWF world title. How does it feel at your age to possibly have a chance of being a world champion?
Well, I mean, it doesn't come as a surprise to me. It might come as a surprise to other people who don't know me, don't know what I'm about. But when the tournament gets going, then people will very quickly begin to realise who I am and what I'm about.
So before we kind of delve a little bit deeper into your training and stuff like that, what qualities do you think that you bring to CWF?
Versatility. If you put me in there with someone bigger than me, I'll run rings around them. Put me in there with someone smaller than me, I'll throw them out like a wet tracksuit. It doesn't matter who you put in there, I'll knock them down.
So the great thing about Colton is he's not just one-dimensional. He's an all-rounder. He can compete with anyone at any level.
Yeah.
So in terms of you mentioned about being put in there with bigger guys. Can you just let everybody know exactly how tall you really are?
I am 6'6".
I mean, there's not going to be a hell of a lot of people out there that are bigger than you are when it comes to being in a wrestling match.
Maybe not taller. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not the biggest guy. I'm not the most muscular guy in the world. There are people heavier than me and stronger than me out there, but I mean, it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
So you're going to be in the tournament. One of the people you could come up against is also in this conversation here, which is Mr. Stuart Murphy, the boss of CWF. How would you feel if during this tournament you had to take out the person who was paying your wage?
Needs must, I suppose. Needs must. As I said, it doesn't matter who. I don't have any allegiances in that tournament. There's no one in the tournament that I have a soft spot for. I respect Stuart Murphy. I respect Dale and Hendry. I know Dale well, but I'm there to win. I'm not there to make friends.
Now, you haven't had a large list of matches. I want to ask, firstly, before I ask possibly a slightly controversial question, is who have your matches been against, and what was it like stepping out in the ring for the first time?
My first match was against 3 fellow debutants. It was AJ Diaz, Darren J. Blair, and Jack Ripley. It was a tag team match, so I mean it wasn't one-on-one. That's my specialty, but it was good to make the debut. It was very nerve-wracking. And then the next match was against Robert Wishart, who's a veteran. That one, the nerves were eased a bit, but it's dream come true, I suppose.
Now, as somebody who's been invited to host show 1 of CWF, and I'm nervous about doing it, what advice would you give to somebody who is nervous going into something brand new?
Relax and listen to those around you who are more experienced. That's certainly what I've done. And it certainly eased the nerves a bit.
Now, you lost the first 2 matches of your career. How do you plan on making sure that is not the end result of what happens in CWF?
Right, okay. So, right, I'm done with being nice now, Martin. I've come on your show. I'm answering your stupid little questions. And you want to talk about losses. Martin Anderson wants to talk about losses. Martin Anderson, who has never had a match. You've never laced up a pair of boots. You don't know what it feels like to have all the attention on you. The only attention you know is of the 6 people that watch this show every week. So I suggest that you sit there and ask me some decent questions.
Right. It doesn't matter how many matches Colton's had or Colton's lost. At the end of the day, he's probably still been the absolute superstar of all those matches.
Right, you can calm down, Paul Heyman. I don't need someone to big me up. I respect you, Stuart Murphy, but I get the impression that you kind of want me on your side. Maybe you want me in your corner after the tournament, but I'm afraid that I have to make it clear that won't happen. The services of Colton Davis has already been snapped up, and it's not been revealed today, and you'll find out as show 1.
Wait, so is it somebody who's in the tournament or somebody who's going to be at show 1 has managed to secure your services already? Because this is pretty big news. We didn't know was coming out here.
Yeah, it must be annoying, Stuart. It's your show and you don't even know.
This is something Stuart has grown used to in recent weeks, unfortunately.
It's no one in the tournament. It's someone that will be at show 1. And it's gonna be big.
Well, that's certainly not something I was expecting today, and I'm sure Murphy's going to be having words with me later because he's going to expect that this was probably my fault, just like he expects everything's my fault right now. So let's kind of try and move on to something a little bit less controversial and ask you, where did you train?
I was trained at the Source Wrestling School in Glasgow. Certainly one of the most prestigious places. I mean, it's producing people like me. So I made my debut, as I said, last year. So I started training when I was 15 years old and just never looked back.
So how do you feel the pandemic has actually impacted your training? I know some wrestling schools are still doing classes online, teaching psychology and promos and stuff. So how's your training been going during the pandemic?
Well, it doesn't stop. I've got goals that need to be worked towards, whether we're wrestling or not. There's many ways that I'm keeping myself sharp, whether it be watching wrestling as much as possible, analysing other people's matches, analysing my matches, and of course the physical aspect of training myself getting in the best possible shape so that when we do return and when I walk through the curtain at CWF, the first show, then I'm ready, and I'll know that there's nothing more that I could have done to be prepared.
Now, this is probably slightly less serious than Who Trained You, but do you have a theme music picked that gets you pumped for when you're going out for matches?
I've got custom made theme music. I like to make sure that everything about Colton Davis is as professional as possible. You can find it on iTunes and on Apple Music and Spotify. I believe Colton Davis, Phoenix Rising, if anybody wants to listen.
Smashing. So, before we let you go, because we know you're a busy man who's working very hard.
Just before you finish, Martin, and I have some news that both yourself as the host and Colton might be interested to hear.
Okay.
And that is that I suddenly have now heard back from someone and may be in a position to announce the first match of the tournament.
Okay. Well, this is more news to me. Which is this relevant for Colton? Does Colton need to know this information?
It is relevant to Colton, yes.
Okay. So, what is the first match that we can announce for the CWF tournament?
The first match that we can announce for the CWF tournament will be Colton Davis against the Supreme Ryan Richards.
Okay, that's two very big guys. Now, I thought that Colton Davis, 6'6", he was going to be the big standout in terms of height. But Ryan Richards is 6'3", 230 pounds. So let's hand over to you, Colton. How do you feel about the fact that your first match for CWF is against a fellow big guy, Ryan Richards?
I mean, I relish the opportunity. I'm pretty sure there's a long, long line of people that want to smack that guy in the mouth, and I'm going to be one of the first to be able to do it. He's been talking rubbish non-stop for the past year or so. Someone needs to shut him up, and I'm just glad that it's going to be me.
I have to say, I'm sure that that's going to lead to some very strong words coming from the Supreme Ryan Richards. But thank you for joining us today, Colton. And hopefully we're going to hear more from you before we see show one happen. Now, what I do want to say is keep in touch with us, and if Ryan Richards had something to say, we would love to hear your reply on the show as well. But thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yep, you're welcome.
So it was great having Colton on the show. It's always nice when I get a chance to interview somebody who's a wrestler. But I really like interviewing wrestling fans as well. And it comes across, speaking to him when we weren't recording, although he is very clear in what he wants and he has a very strong personality for such a young man. He is still a wrestling fan, and he actually knows some old school wrestling as well. So that's really cool to know that somebody who's a wrestling fan is going to be involved in the company, not just somebody who's in it to kind of make a buck. So I want to ask you, Murphy, seeing as we've managed to keep you around today, how do you feel about the fact that, for me, it's clear you were vying to be his representative, and Colton's somewhat rejected you quite brutally, telling you that he already has representation at show one. Firstly, do you know who his representation might be? And secondly, how are you feeling right now?
Well, I don't know who his representation might be because he's not really gave us any hints as to who it could be. All I will say is no one rejects the boss, not without consequences. And I'll just leave that there.
Okay, so let's talk about the first match. Now, it appears that whilst we had Colton on for the interview, we actually had confirmation through from his opponent. Now, for those who are maybe tuning in a little bit late, his opponent is the Supreme Ryan Richards. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you put these two together? Because you've got a 6'6" teenager in against a 6'3", 230-pound guy. I mean, this is your two big guys in against each other in round one. Can you tell me why you would put these two guys together in round one?
Well, it just sort of came to me. It wasn't actually a plan that I had. But I think the disrespect that was shown to me towards Colton, he needs someone to put him in his place, and he needs to learn that at his age, he needs to respect people. And I think the perfect man to do that is Ryan Richards. But hey, I don't need to big him up. He's more than capable, telling you himself just how good he can be.
So you're telling me that part of the reason why Ryan Richards, the 6'3", 230-pound man, has been put in the ring with Colton is to teach him a lesson?
Yes, entirely.
Well, those are strong words. I'm sure we'll have some kind of reply from Colton, and hopefully, you can reach out to Ryan and get some comments from him about his place in the card and whether he's looking forward to his match with Colton.
Oh, there'll definitely be something in the coming weeks from Ryan. There's no question about that.
Well, I have noticed something, Murphy. In recent weeks, you only seem to be willing to be on the show when there's something that you want to say and something that you want to do. So thank you for joining me anyway.
You're very welcome.
So for anybody who enjoys their wrestling like me, and you can sit and watch anything, $5 wrestling, AEW, Impact. I love watching wrestling. So the takeovers are something that, although they have the WWE production feel, they also seem to have a little bit more of an indie product feel. And in recent months, we have seen takeover, for me, and people can disagree, but you'd be wrong from my perspective. Takeovers have become this long, drawn out. Everything has to be 40 minutes, and everybody has to be having the same type of matches and kicking out of all these finishers. And I think this pay-per-view has kind of reversed the trend overall. There was obviously lots of false finishes and lots of little teases in certain matches, but for a pay-per-view, I was thoroughly enjoying it the whole time. Now, I was playing FIFA 21, and I had my phone kind of like this in front of me watching, so that I was flicking between the two, and I really enjoyed pretty much every match. There wasn't a match that I disliked. Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai defeated Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon to win the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, and overall, I think it went very well. I think in terms of how Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai have been presented, I've not been a fan of them together as a team, but at the same time, I think both are talented, and both Dakota Kai. This is probably going to sound controversial, but for me, she's a bit like Kaylee Ray, and I don't mean this as an insult to either of them, but they kind of remind me of like your best friend's little sister, and it's almost like I see a lot of people saying that, focusing on the fact that they have a different look to WWE and stuff, but to me, they just look like your best friend's little sister in the sense that you kind of, I don't know what it is. You don't look at them that way, but that's a positive because you're not looking at them in that way. You get a chance to just enjoy them as performers, which I know that, we all try and be modern and woke, but WWE hire a lot of very attractive females to wrestle. And I feel with Dakota Kai and Kaylee Ray, who are both attractive girls, they have this girl next door quality about them that it's almost like at some point you can see them as attractive, but when that bell rings, you just think about the fact that they're wrestling, and that's a great quality. If that's coming across in a negative way, then obviously I'm not meaning it that way. I just mean that girl next door thing that both of them have is a very, very good quality. Rhea Ripley does not have that girl next door quality. She has the superstar quality, which again is nothing to do with her attractiveness, but just how she comes across. She doesn't come across like the person you'd be exchanging words with over the fence. She comes across like somebody that you would see at the airport and go, "Oh my God, she looks like she means something, or she's a star." And I think Dakota Kai and Kaylee Ray don't necessarily have that, but that's a good thing. You need all these different elements in a wrestling show, and I think I was not a Dakota Kai fan. And the more I watch her, the more I see the similarities, not necessarily in ring style, but just how I feel about Kaylee Ray and how I feel about Dakota Kai. It took me a while to get on board with both of them. But I think once you are, then you are, because they are good. And that's something that WWE have done a very good job in recent years of diversifying and not having just the blonde, big titty girl as their wrestler. And yeah, they do clearly still hire some people because they're blonde and have big boobs, or because they have big boobs. But thankfully, we're kind of moving beyond that. And we're getting to see wrestling, which for me is what we're tuning in for. If you want boobs, there is free websites you can get that on. Certainly, if you want to watch wrestling, sometimes outfits could be, not so much now, but certainly WWE, the outfits were just tasteless. And I think thankfully now we're past that. Johnny Gargano defeated Kushida to retain the North American Championship. What else can they do with Johnny Gargano? For me, he's stale, but that match was good. I'm a fan of Kushida because he likes to dress like Marty McFly, which is fun. Now, MSK defeated the Grizzled Young Veterans. I wanted Grizzled Young Veterans to win. I get why MSK won. Not angry at all. There was one spot they did, which at this point I was kind of playing FIFA 21, so I was kind of seeing the big stuff and not seeing a lot of the smaller stuff. There was a lot of good teamwork from both teams, which shows that they are both teams that have worked together for a while, which I love tag team wrestling. But the bit that got me was when there was the dive through the middle rope into the clothesline like the Legion of Doom. I thought that was cool. I popped big time. Instantly went to the group chat and it was like, Grizzled Young Veterans, they look amazing tonight. And when they didn't win, it doesn't matter. They still look great, and so did MSK, which is good. Io Shirai defeated Mercedes Martinez. Oh, by the way, that previous match was to win the male Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, which MSK getting. That's a big rub, and obviously, hopefully, they've got big stuff planned for them. And Grizzled Young Veterans versus MSK again at a future takeover should be quite a good match, particularly if they're fighting for the belts. Now, Io Shirai defeated Mercedes Martinez and Toni Storm to retain the NXT Women's Championship. I really wanted Toni Storm to win that. I think she's done really well in recent months since coming back. Finn Balor defeated Pete Dunne to retain the NXT Championship. There was some really cool stuff in this match. At one point, Finn Balor was down and he thought he had the better of Pete Dunne, who still had his fingers in his hands, and you could see the reaction of Finn Balor as he started pulling apart his fingers. It was actually really cool. I think the match was good. The finish was good. But it was the bit that came afterwards where you had the arrival of the Undisputed Era that kind of chased off Pete Dunne and his cronies. And then that led to them almost kind of being supportive of Finn Balor, who at this point now, it appears, is a babyface. And it led to Adam Cole kicking Finn Balor in the face, which led to a little bit of toing and froing between Undisputed Era. And then Adam Cole kicked Kyle O'Reilly in the face. So it looks like the breakup of the Undisputed Era, especially when Adam Cole stood on the apron looking to get Roderick Strong to come with him, and Roderick kind of froze. There was that few seconds where you just weren't sure where he was going. The story at the end of this kind of changes the top of the card, and I think it changes it very well. I think in addition to Adam Cole turning heel, you obviously have Eli Drake, and that really shores up the heel side of things, baby face side of things. Kyle O'Reilly being turned on by Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly and Finn Balor as your two top baby faces in that company. I wouldn't be complaining. You also then have obviously the auxiliary characters around them. I think Pete Dunne and his faction is very good as a heel faction. So for me, NXT had a great pay-per-view. I think as far as enjoyable wrestling shows, it's the most enjoyable show I've seen since before Christmas. Now, SmackDown has some good promos, and there's some good in-ring action when Daniel Bryan and Claudio Castagnoli, Cesaro are in the ring. But overall, both shows kind of drag. This was 2.5 hours, and for me, it was a really, really good show. I think NXT's TV show at times seems a bit almost like they're just trying to get lots of people on air. When they do their pay-per-views and they give matches a little bit more room to breathe and things just have a slightly different feel, there isn't many shows out there, I think, that are as good as NXT. Now, I know a lot of people are fans of the Japanese stuff, which is great if you are, but I think there's a disconnect with some people, and I certainly suffer from that. And it's not to do with the fact that I dislike the wrestling, because the content itself is good. It's just, I think when you read things through subtitles and production quality and certain aspects of it just kind of detract a little bit. But that doesn't mean their matches are any poorer. Just the engagement with the weekly content is a little bit higher with NXT. For me, I would say, for us being in February, there's no doubt it's the best show of the year so far. I think by the end of the year, this will probably be in the top 5 still in terms of the match quality, the excitement, and the finishes were exciting as well. And nobody was involved in matches that seemed pointless or got buried. So for me, very, very good show overall. And I'm very happy that I actually stayed up until ungodly hours to watch it. So we get to do a little bit of a wrap-up here. I haven't done a wrap-up before, have I? Anyway, so what we did when we spoke about the wrestling news, we spoke about some cool things. I did get a little bit pissed off, as is the want. Every week I do get a little bit angry about something wrestling related. We've got to have our passion somewhere. But we also revealed participant 3, and as you now know, participant number 4. We have the first match for the CWF Fresh Start show in June, on June 19th. And it is, of course, Colton Davis versus Ryan Richards. I have to say, a 6'6", he'll be 18 by the time that show comes around, I believe, versus 6'3", 6'4", 240-pound guy. That is going to be one hell of a match, and they're going to have to reinforce that ring when those two guys get together. For me, I'm excited to see what's going to be happening with CWF. I know that Stuart Murphy plans a few more announcements in the coming weeks, and I have to tell you that I've been told 1 or 2 names that are coming up, one of whom I am very shocked is not under contract with WWE. All I'm going to say, and I said this before, so if it's a repetition of the clue and this maybe hearing it again helps you, he is 100% going to help take CWF to the max.